Hello, everyone, and welcome to Coffee with Convery, the podcast that's your launchpad for career inspiration. I'm your host, Brien Convery, and around here, we believe success isn't just about climbing the corporate ladder, it's also about building your own jungle gym. Each episode, we share real stories with all kinds of careers and all levels to help you design a career portfolio of sorts that fits you and your passions. Let's dive into today's conversation. Today's guest is someone who reminds us that careers don't start in boardrooms, they start with people. Adam Castle is a developer and growth coach, mental health ambassador, and the director of venture services and partnership at WEtech Alliance. But before startup accelerators, innovation programs, and ecosystem building, Adam's career began in social work, youth services, recreation, and community care. His journey proves that something I deeply believe: the best innovative leaders don't start with technology, they start with empathy. Adam, welcome to Coffee with Convery.
Brian, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
So excited to get this conversation going. So let's maybe start with some rapid fire questions. What's your superpower?
Definitely connecting people.
Connecting people, I would agree. Um, what was your favorite subject in school?
It was dual. I really loved science and I really liked writing as a huge English major.
Awesome, awesome. We all start somewhere. What was your first job?
It was as an entrepreneur, but like with a kind of a three-prong approach. And so I'd go around to neighbors in our neighborhood and I would ask them if they had any issues around their house that I could make a potion for. And so I would do this for like wasp nests or weeds and with very little supervision from an adult perspective, I would go into our basement and like put together all sorts of household chemicals and sell them these like potions to fix whatever kind of ailed them. That was kind of like step one. And then as soon as I was old enough, I got my babysitting certification from the YMCA.
Yeah.
And had someone at my mom's work help make me like cards, and so I think I was like 13, and I would go down to like the primary school classrooms and hand out at pickup to the moms that I was open for babysitting. And then later on, as I got to high school, I started my own DJ company, which kind of took off in a really
Ah,
interesting way.
I didn't know that about you. I don't think we talked about the DJing thing. That's really cool.
Yes, yeah,
All
yeah. So
three of
that
those
was like
are.
a big
Yeah,
love for me. Yeah, yeah, yeah. A
yeah.
little bit different. Yeah.
So music, I imagine, is still a big part of your life then.
Yeah, so I actually attended St. Mike's Choir School for Boys in Toronto for a few years, and
Okay.
so was a part of that. I yeah, definitely love music.
Awesome. Awesome. If you had to describe yourself in one word, what would it be?
I'd like to think that I'm a builder of things like, my family, so a small immediate impact of myself as well, my awareness of people that we get to work with here at WeTech and within our community, and then in broader networks that I've been a part of as well.
Amazing. Awesome. All right. Well, I was so looking forward to this conversation. It's already starting up interesting. I'm learning more and more about you too. So let's take us back to where it all started. Before tech, before startups, before WeTech, you were working directly with youth, families, and community. Take us back to those early years and what did working in social services and recreation teach you about people, about resilience, leadership, and how does that show up in your work today?
Yeah, so I think as many people who get into these helping professions, what initially draws you in, I think, is adverse experience, unfortunately and fortunately. I had, I think, what I would describe as an upbringing that was kind of punctuated with trauma, and then mixed in with some really key, I would say, protective opportunities that kept me on the right side of thing, and also an acknowledgement here of my positionality and of privilege that I've had as well. Um, what I realized, kind of in hindsight, is that when trying to give to others, what I was trying to do was give to others these tools that they could use to heal. And I hope that it would mean that at some point I would kind of heal myself. And of course, like that's not how anything works, right? I realized fairly early in my career that that isn't how that is done, and that you really have to put, actually, John Mark on our team here at WeTech has, the saying that we have to put our oxygen mask on first before we can
Mhm.
help secure anyone else's. And that really resonates truer and truer. As the older I get, you gotta take care of yourself. And so that's kind of where that started. And I think looking back now, I always knew that I wanted to make impact and that I wanted to have a direct impact on the betterment of the things that were around me. And you start with like, well, I want that to be one-on-one. I want that to be with a youth that's experienced something really challenging. And then as I got further down that pathway, I saw like, well, yeah, that impact is great, but it doesn't change the system that we're within. It doesn't change
Mhm.
the fact that when they go home on weekends, they're still going back to the same environment that they were put in that gets them into this place in the first place. And so I started to develop a bit of a friction with those systems.
Mhm.
And it distastes for how unfair they were.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think the value of bringing that lived experience to the conversation, to the way you approach life is also helpful because you've seen and experienced yourself some of that and recognizing some of those areas for opportunities um, make a lot of sense in how you've approached that. Let's talk a little bit about your career because your path isn't linear at all. I mean, you've child youth worker, behavioral specialist, economic development, data analyst, entrepreneur, and now a startup ecosystem builder, as you said. For our listeners who feel pressure to connect the dots early, which I hear often, I'm sure you do as well, how did you learn to trust that each chapter of this journey was actually building transferable skills, maybe even when those next steps weren't obvious?
So, I mean, the short answer is that I didn't in the moment. You
Yeah.
don't you
Okay.
don't see where the dots are connected. It isn't until you get some hindsight, you have this opportunity, and you start to realize like, hey, there's a real value in looking backwards on these things. And so, um, I think what I started to really see early on that I think helped to build this is that there's a lot of similarities. So, in working in youth justice, or I was at a camp up north in Ontario for youth with learning disabilities. You get a teenager or a youth with this rap sheet, this like report that says, here's who they are, here's what troubles them or what struggles they have. And as soon as you have the opportunity to break down the walls and develop out a relationship with them, you immediately see that they're a human being and that human
Yeah.
beings are all relatively driven and dissuaded by the same things. And so what I found is that the difference in between you and me and the folks that I've worked with is that there's a differentiator when it comes down to resources. So socioeconomic opportunity. And we now know with all this certainty, after all of these years of studying kind of the societal influences that are at play, that systems that we live within are not built to distribute opportunity evenly. And
No.
so my first takeaway within that career was like, wait a second, like I'm not different from anybody else. And so it gave me this mentality where it doesn't matter whether I'm talking to youth or a police officer or today a CEO or a mayor or a startup founder. Everyone's a person that really responds well and becomes their best selves when you approach them with things like respect and curiosity and trust and belief that they're able to achieve the visions that they hold for themselves, and also gives you this opportunity to say like, I need a little bit of patience here, understand who they believe they are within their own story. And that's very much a social worky term, but I find that it's so applicable to working with people kind of of all ages. Like I've also worked in so many jobs that didn't have a title that would be considered like leadership. Leadership, I think, in the people context can be done really no matter where you find yourself. So whether I was a caseworker for CAS, or I'm leading a cabin up north, or even my earlier jobs where I'm working as like a dog grooming assistant, it didn't really matter what the position was. What I found was that if you're able to talk to people and understand kind of where they're coming from, you can have an opportunity to help lead them or help make them or help them to achieve the things that they really want. Um, and what's interesting is like now that I'm at this level and I talk to leaders and I chat with them about, what they define leadership as, it's they echo that. It doesn't really matter about the title. It kind
Yeah.
of matters about where you're coming and whether or not you take the time to meet people where they're at. Um,
Yeah.
I would say for listeners who really are feeling that pressure, right, to connect the dots as you kind of initially asked this question, um, the next step's never obvious. And you're not going to get that chance to connect them until well after sometimes, but really being open to opportunity. And I think looking eagerly for places where you can apply your unique value proposition is what essentially ultimately carved that path out for me, which now I can look back and even like today I'm looking back and that the connectivity between those things, those very disparate moments in my life now are so much clearer in terms of why they're connected. And it all really comes down to me to people and wanting to be good to those that are around me.
Wow. Man, there's so much to unpack in that answer, and it was so valuable in everything you said. And I want to start with one thing. Like, first of all, we need more atoms in the world because human-centric leadership isn't always around us. And I think that's what you've articulated there with your leadership and what you've seen is that putting that human first, I mean, part of the equation. Even before we were getting started for this podcast, like it's building those relationships and conversations that allow people to flourish on both sides of an equation that are so important. And so thank you for what you do there and your thoughts. I think too with the idea of not knowing how to connect the dots, or maybe even that you are doing that, makes a lot of sense too. I'll say we, the royalry, even you and I, we've talked about transferable skills. The other
Hmm.
day I was talking to someone a little younger, and they're like, okay, like they don't know what transferable skills means
Yeah,
even,
yeah,
right? And so we use those words a lot today to
yeah,
describe, but I think we need to empower people also to understand what does that actually mean? Because young people who have worked at McDonald's, as an example, I've said, hey, you've worked at McDonald's, you've done customer service. They're like, yeah, but it was at McDonald's. I'm like, no, yeah, but that's
yeah.
customer service. That's
That's a
transferable,
fantastic
right?
base. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's definitely something that I think we need to talk about more and really explode out that conversation because we need to prepare the young people to be able to articulate who they are, like you said. Um, and sometimes it's just that they don't know how to do that. So then we bypass them.
Yes. Yeah. And I think we've done a disservice into valuing um the term even like soft skills. Like
Yes,
the soft skills are what's transferable.
that's right.
It's and I've heard them called professional skills and this idea that your ability to relate to someone else, to have self-awareness, to be able to carry out interpersonal relationships, like that's the stuff that carries over. And what's interesting is that the way technology is evolving so rapidly with AI and quantum and robotics right now is those are the skills that are never going to be replaced. No matter how good ChatGPT gets at sycophantic responses to you,
Yeah,
it's never going to be able to swap out that real human opportunity or ability to connect. Um, and that's something that whether you're a introvert or an extrovert or an introvert, like there's all of these
yeah,
terminologies for it, but that's something that you can always flex as a muscle. Like it is a skill that's obtainable um and you're able to practice it.
yeah,
And so it's like and it's low hanging fruit too, because it's something you can develop out whether you're volunteering or you're in your community or you're going to, events or it doesn't really matter. You can find ways to practice that, and that becomes such a strong skill on job.
yeah. No, absolutely. So in the current world too, where you're supporting entrepreneurs, and coaching and working with them, especially with WeTech, which we'll get into a little bit here too, is
Yeah.
Um, how has your background in the mental health and the community building space shape how you approach working with entrepreneurs differently, maybe, or maybe
Yeah.
not differently for you, but differently for others?
Yeah, I mean, so I think WeTech has been, we talk about connecting the dots and then seeing how they all come together. WeTech is this like really special confluence of that. So it allows me to practice a lot of the skills that I've developed out in mental health and people caring. But then also allowed me to develop out all these new tools. And the team that I find myself with here are all so good at what they do as individuals. And when we come together, we have that opportunity to kind of like share and learn and grow from one another. It's just been really cool to be able to be fed by that as a
Mm,
professional, as a human being. Um, you know, I think I've worked with a lot of populations that would be quote unquote labeled as vulnerable. Um, but I've never met anyone as vulnerable as an entrepreneur that doesn't think that their idea is going to work, or that they don't have enough runway to make it to next month, or that they're going to default on a loan, and that means that they've over leveraged their mortgage and their household income or their own financial stability in order to have an idea get to that next stage. And so when you're dealing with an entrepreneur and we have these really private conversations that are one-on-one, you're dealing directly with someone's psychology. And so even though I'm no longer responsible for their mental health, I'm still responsible for understanding where they're at in this like entrepreneurial cycle. I think what's really been helpful for me is that that cycle was directly stolen from what I would do in addictions counseling and social work and group therapy, is really taking a moment to understand how is this person showing up into this meeting that we're about to have, what's the stage that they are in. And so you can, you map this over their stages of grief, their stages of change when it comes to
yeah.
addiction. In entrepreneurship, I think there's stages of action where an entrepreneur is either stuck or in momentum or in overwhelm, or they're looking at a pivot moment, and it's something to really figure out for them. They're stuck on that problem. Understanding where they're at in that moment is really easy now for me to be able to identify and then apply an intervention. So if they're feeling in momentum, if the feeling there is like things are going really well, then I'm not going to come and sit down and say, okay, you need to do all these other things. Or they're feeling stuck, I'm also similarly not going to pile on a bunch of other things that I think that they're not doing well enough or that they haven't achieved. It's really about kind of like identifying where someone is and meeting them at that point, and coming up very much alongside them. And I think that's an important distinction that I don't really
Mm,
see in this space too often, especially in publicly funded economic development. It's very top down. It's we've created a program, and what's wrong with you for not taking advantage of it? Versus this mentality that I think I've told and I've tried to instill is that we're coming into someone's life at the most chaotic moment of it, when they're trying to create something new, or when they're growing something new, or they're having, a crisis of faith in themselves. And so it's not our job to become something that is a crutch, but it's
mm,
something to come up alongside and say, like, hey, I see that you're stuck. I see that you're in momentum, so you don't need anything. Or I see that you're feeling overwhelmed, so let's simplify it. And just kind of being there and allowing them to um, really figure things out on their own. Um, but also reflecting back to them, like, hey, like, do you realize what you just figured out there? Do you recognize that you were able to solve that problem for yourself? And really being like, you didn't need me for that. Like, that's not me. That you would have figured that out on your own. And just helping to build that confidence. That's such a big part of entrepreneurship, especially when you're at these higher levels. You don't know. It's very
yeah.
hard to get feedback, and so yeah, especially for someone like myself that it requires that external validation. Sometimes it's hard, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank you for that because we do have quite a few listeners and followers of this podcast that are stepping foot in entrepreneurship, or they've started an organization or a passion project, and they go through and they have those moments of doubt, those opportunities where they're not feeling like, hey, I don't know, or maybe things are going great, but something comes from the side and hits them in the head, and
Yeah.
it's a tough space, when you're sort of playing all those roles that you might get in a work culture where you actually are doing a job for someone else. So I want to dig a little deeper on this whole idea around mental health being non-negotiable in leadership, and especially for entrepreneurs who may be listening to or thinking about starting
Mhm.
their business. startup culture, when you just hear startup and you hear startup culture, it often glorifies burnout in that, you look and you see people and you think, oh, I don't know if I can get into that. Like that looks really like difficult, and everyone's running around and going crazy with
Mhm.
their ideas. But what advice do you have for founders and young professionals, maybe to learn or unlearn, if you will, what they might want to sustain success and not have that
Yeah,
burnout thing overtake them?
I actually think that the generation coming up today is a
Yeah,
lot more perceptive to this and a lot more attuned to it
interesting.
than I think the millennials and Gen X's were, which were, we were kind of told like just put your head down and do the work.
That's
Stop
true.
complaining,
That's very true.
just do that work. And
Yeah.
um what I think we didn't see was so there's this new billionaire class in North America that we've seen emerge quite literally in the last, couple decades. The Mark Zuckerbergs of the world who came out and said like you just move fast and break things. That's our motto here at Facebook is move fast and break things. And we took that in early days of startup founder leadership and said like, well, that's the model then. That's the Valley model that everyone should be holding up to this gold standard of like move fast, break things, rebuild it. If it doesn't work, that's okay. You just try something else. But I think we're living now through this moment where sustainability is a lot more important. And not just like obviously, yes, ecological sustainability is a big one. But even from a sense of like, we don't have the same kind of resources that these startups did at the turn of the birth of the internet, at the birth of these social networks or those types of things. Capital is not unlimited. And so, for this expectation that a founder is going to grind day and night 24/7, they're going to create things fast, break them, rebuild them, even with the dawn of AI and vibe coding and all of these new opportunities that people have to shorten the time between idea to product, it's not sustainable. And it's also a really easy way to lose your why throughout the process, I think. And so like I think there's a couple things that we have to unlearn. One is that you have to figure everything out on your own. You have to be the smartest at the table, or that grinding is the same as success. I really think that trying to achieve for our leaders so that they can model to their employees, because that's another thing, is like no one's going to listen to you. You have
That's
to
true.
show them with your
Yeah.
actions. Um, is that the effort has to be to harmonize the work-life balance and harmonize the hats that you're wearing so that it's not a balance, it's a harmony. Um,
Mm.
and I think when you look at things like burnout culture, and which is still like so prevalent, we're starting to see that the trade-offs aren't there. And even for people that have achieved, the billionaire status, which it's going to be harder and harder to do as time goes by, right? Like capitalism has a consolidation of resources. It isn't, there isn't more that comes down,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Um, what are the trade-offs? And when you see these leaders who have, you know, very publicly failed personal relationships and strained interpersonal dynamics within their lives, and weird proclivities towards things, is that the trade-off that's really appropriate, or do you want something else, I think, for your life? And from what I've seen, this new younger generation is very much concerned on providing themselves with, I think, happiness first,
Hmm.
and that's the measurement of success. And I would argue that that's the way to do it. I would also say too, like there's seasons for things. There's gonna be times where your career is the most important thing, and you're doing nothing but pushing towards getting to that next step and that next level. And then times when yourself or your health or your family or whatever is as well. And so understanding that you may need to it's a marathon of sprints, which I used that this week, where it's
I love
like,
that.
it's a really long time horizon for you to be in your career, and you're gonna have these moments where like I'm working my ass off to accomplish something here. And as soon as you're done that, it doesn't end. The work doesn't stop, but then you take a step back a little bit, and then you take a
Yeah.
moment to breathe, and then it's another sprint, and it's another. So just realizing that that's kind of the cycle. I think sometimes we get trapped into under like this proclivity towards um, accomplishing everything all at once. We need to get
Yeah.
everything done. And that's just not the case. And when you look at it, like I'm 40 years old. I'm gonna be working another 30 years. As hard as I worked in that last, decade or 20 years to get my career to here, I have to
Yep.
double that. I have to work that again. And so it's like, how do I do this in a way that leaves me with enough in the tank to be able to show up this way at work every single day. And so it's, without losing anything,
Totally.
it's a long-term game.
Yeah, it totally is. And I love the marathon of sprints and, you know, uh, and the advice and the insights and perspectives you've shared so far have been really fantastic for our listeners to kind of get their head around. I wanted to also take a moment because I think it's important that we also we highlight WEtech Alliance as well. Like, how did that all come about? What do you do there? What's the organization all about? I mean, I've had the privilege of meeting you at the office in Windsor and seeing you
Yeah.
in person and everything, but you know, um, sometimes people think they would expect that type of organization to be in Toronto, not in Windsor. And I just wanted you to maybe spend a little bit of time of highlighting all the work you're doing there
Yeah.
as well for our listeners who might be around the corner and don't even know you exist there.
Yeah, so I appreciate that opportunity. So
Yeah,
WeTech, as I mentioned, like best job I've ever had, large part due to the team that I get to work with. We're a regional innovation center, so we're almost 17 across Ontario, or 18 actually as of this year that exists solely to help innovative and tech-based companies start, sell, and grow. And so all of our services are really geared towards that, with kind of three pillars that hold it up. So there's the acceleration side of things. There's a talent aspect to it as well, to making sure that we're connecting kind of the emerging workforce with what's happening from an economic development perspective. And there's also community, which in a region like ours that hasn't traditionally had a lens for technology entrepreneurship or innovative entrepreneurship, at least in the Valley sense of how it's defined or the Toronto sense of how it's defined, helping people see themselves as part of this community has been really important to a lot of our success. And so we offer one-to-one advisory for our clients, workshops and events for networking and things like that. But really, what we provide to our founders, and this is something that our startup advisor talks about quite often, is just a place to listen and a place to give a reflective environment that's judgment free and is filled with, I think, patience for where someone is at in their journey. And so we are in Toronto by way of our network. And so
yep,
that's what I think
there
makes
you
us
go.
really special as an economic development organization, especially locally, is that we're connected not only to the Regional Innovation Center network right across Ontario, but also connected to the Tech Councils of North America network that's right across North America, and the Canadian tech network that's right across Canada. And so we always say, if a company's starting here in Windsor and they want to knock on our door, you're actually knocking on like 100 or 200 others, because our biggest power, our superpower at WeTech is that network and is connecting founders that are here to where they need to connect for development of their next opportunity. And that's, especially up by the way is surrounded on three sides by another country. Um, our biggest value is ensuring that we can help these companies to connect to the types of resources that they need elsewhere, because we don't know everything, and we're very aware that we don't know anything, but we're very lucky that we have a network of amazing growth coaches and people that are able to build those connections and provide resources, much like yourself, to our companies that you're involved with as well. And so, yeah, I think that's WeTech in a nutshell. But I would say if you really even want to distill it down a little bit more, we are a team of individuals who care very much about the Windsor, Essex, and Chatham-Kent region and the businesses that call this place home. We care very much about creating a future for this place that is filled with opportunity for the generations that are coming up, for my daughter and John Mark, our marketing director's daughter, and Jen on our team, her kids, and we care very much about what this looks like, this place looks like, when our time as stewards of this organization is done.
Yeah, No, sounds good. Thank you. Can you hear me still?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So I want to make sure. So let's thank you for sharing that. I think it's important to highlight what you're doing there and what you're providing to the communities. So big part of our audience too, as I said, entrepreneurs. There's also a lot of early in career listeners, people who are still trying to figure it out, maybe feel left behind, insecure, maybe they don't belong. They're not really sure where they fit in this world of work. What would you say to someone who's perspectives on that for maybe students and early in career people to think about as they're navigating that school to work journey?
Yeah, I mean, there's no way around it. It's a through situation, not an around. And it's going to be challenging, and especially, emerging into the world right now, the markets right now, the global geopolitical status of things right now, it's not easy. And so grace, I think, some kindness towards self is really important in this because, you're going to get 1,000 no's before you get one yes. Sometimes when it comes to job interviews or even, sending resumes into this black hole of AI shouting at AI right now,
Yeah,
when it comes to the hiring situation. But I'd say like just try and focus on relationships first. What I've seen, as I'm 40 and I've got friends that are changing careers and mid-career shift right now, the networks that you build early on are ones that mature with you. And it's actually been a delightful shock to me to see it kind of happen. But the relationships you build really, really matter early on. And so talk to others in the field that you want to get into. Talk to everyone you can,
yeah,
volunteer in or around the sectors that you kind of want to be a part of. Use tools like LinkedIn to build up your network and make connections and do it selflessly. And I don't mean that in like, I mean it in terms of, if you want to connect someone genuinely to learn from them, they are going to be so much more receptive to teaching you than meeting with them and saying like, well, what can you do for me? I really want to get into your company. Can you write me a letter of recommendation without knowing exactly who I am? And so that give first mentality, which is a big one for us at WeTech, and we're big fans of Brad Feld, who built the Colorado ecosystem, is one that's, I think, has to be prevalent for anyone who really wants to get ahead in a career.
yeah. Give first. It's a good lesson. Now, thinking about our employers on the other side too, because we were talking a little bit about this too. What's one shift employers might think about doing to better support this up and coming talent and maybe make a difference?
This one, I would steal from a lot of people that I've been listening to lately, which is, for years, the prevalent way the culture has been in work life has been identity second. I am an economic developer who is a father, lover of books, son, etc., friend second. Whereas this new generation that's coming up, their identity first. They identify with who they are and they lead that. And employers that respect that tend to get better results. But employers that try and suppress that and say, yes, but you're not, you're a cog in this, in this engine that we're running. Um, they don't respect, I think, a personal vision from their employees. And that makes it really hard for those employees to invest in the organizational vision overall. And so it's just, I think it's respect and curiosity, those types of things.
Yeah, huge, huge shift. But those that get it right are going to get it right.
Yes. Yeah.
So we're getting close to the end. I know I could talk to you for hours, and we will continue to talk, I'm sure, after this podcast for hours. But if you had to think about one big takeaway from this conversation today, thinking about some of the listeners who might be tuning into this conversation, what would you hope that they kind of take away from this conversation with you around careers, leadership, building a life that feels meaningful? What do you hope that it is from your perspective?
Um, that's a great question, and one that actually I didn't get a chance to prepare at a time, but
That's okay.
I I think maybe it'll make it better because of that. But I really think that, so I will tell you that the last 2 years I've taken a bit of a journey in terms of my understanding of these systems that we're working in as economic developers, systems from a business perspective, and helping our startups understand like businesses act very much like living organisms, and ecosystems act very much like forests, and so do cities, and human built constructions mimic the stuff that you see in the natural world. We are no different, and we're not outside of the systems that you see in a forest or in an anthill or all of those things. And so remembering that, and remembering that everyone you meet is in the middle of their own system. So throughout your career journey and throughout your interactions in your community, and within your families, like everyone's in the middle of something that they will never be able to fully articulate to you. And so giving grace as often as you can, to me, that really feels like it allows for this lens that says like, hey, we're all the same, we're all on the same page, regardless of color of skin or gender or orientation or anything of that. When you slow down long enough to realize that you're all in a giant system together, and that we, essentially are on this bus at the same time. The people that were around, we're
That's true.
all not going to be here within 100 years. So whether you like someone or not, this is your partner on this rock that's hurtling through space. Um, and then applying that mentality of like, how do I give first? How can I assist them or help add value to this relationship? Because what I found, and it's true within career and interpersonal relationships, but that mentality has an ROI that is profound. And it has helped pay dividends to me in my career and my family and my life time and time and time and time again. And so that's why I will always lead with that mentality.
I love it. Give first, give first. I love it. Thank you for that. And thank you for reminding us again here that innovation just isn't about speed or scale. It is about people, it's about
Mhm.
trust, and it's about doing the work that actually lasts. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be on the Coffee with Convery podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you, and I'm sure our audience is really excited too from listening to you and hearing all the great insights and perspectives you shared with them today. So thank you.
Oh, it's been a pleasure to be here, and I just want you to know, like, I really value our friendship. You and I have met relatively not long ago, but man, there's something clicking there, and I'm very excited to see how that evolves and to follow you along in your career as well.
Thank you, Adam. That's amazing and awesome. Just feel the same way. It's been a great path so far. Let's see where this goes from here. If you
Absolutely.
are listeners and if you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. Subscribe to the podcast, coffeewithconvery.com. You can also follow us on Instagram for more stories that stir both your head and your heart. This is again Coffee with Convery, where we remind you that success isn't always about climbing the corporate ladder. Sometimes it's about building your own jungle gym.